This little shiny thing is the Gaahleri Mobius airbrush 0.3mm. It's a nice, shiny new airbrush that got sent over to me. And it's a relatively cheap little budget airbrush. So the question is it worth paying like the £10 more to get this versus the really budget Gaahleri airbrush that I talked about a couple of weeks ago? Now, full disclosure, I got sent the Mobius airbrush free of charge just to try out, but I did buy the GAD airbrush by Gaahleri a little while ago, and I really like it. So first up, let's talk about the looks of this. Straight off the bat, it just looks nicer. And if you're into that kind of thing, then, well, you know what, we've already got a winner. It's a nice looking airbrush. It's basically a very shiny silver type airbrush with accents of gold. So somebody was paying attention with this. The cheaper airbrush, the GAD, which I do really like, is just silver. So, you know, if you like the look of your airbrush, then this one's a little bit sexier. It's also got this cutout. In their advertising, it's quite hilarious. They talk about it having like, you can visually feel the impact of the airbrush. It's like, okay, I can see the bits moving inside of it, but you know, if you stare lustily at an airbrush, then I suppose that makes sense. In terms of dimensions, it's exactly what you'd expect from an airbrush. There's nothing particularly different to any of the other types of airbrushes I've seen before. The one thing that I will note, that if it's a competition between the GAD, which is the really budget airbrush by Gaahleri, versus something like the Mobius, the GAD is far heavier. This is a much lighter airbrush, this Mobius, so it's a little bit nicer to use for prolonged airbrushing sessions. At first, that might not seem like a big deal at all, but there have been times when I've been using the GAD and it can start to get tiring because it's a really heavy airbrush, and that kind of makes it feel premium, but after a long time of using it, it's a pain. This just feels ergonomically nicer to use. It's much lighter. The only downside to that is that if I'm ever attacked by bandits whilst wielding my airbrush, with this I could throw it at somebody and easily kill them. With this, not so much, but yeah, that's probably never gonna happen. A couple of other things to note as well. The trigger is nicer on the Mobius. You can't see it probably in here. Hopefully I've got some B-roll, but on the GAD, it's just a flat white panel. Whereas on the Mobius, it's this nice wedge, and it just feels nicer. It's much more natural to kind of use on the finger. Your finger rests nicely on it. It just allows a little bit more control. Whereas on the GAD, the cheaper one, it's just this little kind of button that you press. It's not quite as nice. The action is also far superior as well. So I have noticed when I've been using this versus the GAD, just the control of the air and the paint that you're letting out of the airbrush, it's so much nicer on this. It's a much smoother action versus something like the GAD. Granted, part of that might be because I've been using this now for about 12 or 18 months, so the older one, you know, it's gonna be stiffer and everything else, but this just gives me so much more control. Now, moving across onto the performance of this is really hard to measure because I am a very amateur airbrusher. When it comes down to using airbrushes, I pretty much just use it for primes, some OSL effects, and just a little bit of detail before I go onto the actual, you know, hand painting bits. And I think anyone who's probably watching this video and looking at budget airbrushes is probably going to be in the same spot. The GAD is almost perfect for that. It does a fantastic job. So what does the Mobius do better in my experience? The first thing it does better, and this is the absolute main thing it does better, is it releases more paint with less air. This is something they advertise on their product page, and it's something I noticed before even reading the product page. I can let out a lot less air and get a really nice flow and spattering of paint. Spattering is probably the wrong word, it doesn't spatter. It flows as nice and sprays as nicely onto my model as something like the GAD does. With this, I have to release a lot of air to get all that paint flow out there. With this, I can do very small amounts. Again, it might not seem like a big issue, but if you are buying a budget airbrush, you're probably buying a budget compressor. And I've got a budget compressor and it can overheat. And at the moment, you can probably tell I'm very sweaty. It's very hot in here. So it can overheat after about 20 minutes. With this, I'm letting out less air. I'm relying on the compressor a little bit less, means I'm working it less, which means it's going to last a little bit longer. But more importantly is if you have a turntable, you've got your models on there, it's really easy to let out too much air and blast those models across your airbrush booth, which is really frustrating. It means you then have to hold them or get them onto a stick and stick them all down. With this, because you're releasing less air, you're less likely to blow them all over, which was nice. I was airbrushing these, for example, I was actually able to get them all to stand up on the turntable and not knock them over. Granted, I did knock them over occasionally, but versus something like other airbrushes I've used, they would have been knocked over all the time. So it's just a nice little quality of life thing. In terms of the paint flow, it does a really good job. I've not had any issues. It's obviously as good as their cheap budget one, and in my opinion, versus other airbrushes that I've used, so I've used an Iwata, I've used a Harden Steinbach, for me and my use case, it does as well as them for priming, for getting down all those base coats, and for things like OSL effects. Granted, there's going to be people out there who would have something like this versus like a premium Harden Steinbach like airbrush, and they can do so much better with something like that. But again, if you're in the market for a budget airbrush, paying all of that extra, potentially an extra £100 or $100 depending where you are, probably isn't going to be worth it. This is just a nice airbrush to use. A couple of things to note as well. The overall package and value, I like the way that Gaahleri does this. So they come in just bog standard box, as you'd expect. But inside the box is this diagram that has like the full breakdown of the airbrush. So if it comes to like figuring out what is it that's broken in here or what bit needs maintenance. So it's one of the things I really like about it. And I always feel like every brand manufacturer should have something similar, because it really, really helps if something goes wrong, where you need to tear down the thing and not have to look online. It's not the end of the world to look online, but sometimes, if I don't know, in my garage, for example, the signal's really bad for any kind of internet. So then if I suddenly need to look something up, it's really a pain. Whereas actually if I had these diagrams and stuff like that for basically every type of thing that I use, that'd be really, really helpful. Also, the eagle-eyed amongst you may notice that I'm in a different t-shirt. Yeah, my battery ran out on my microphone and I didn't realise. So instead of doing a voiceover, I came back to do the rest. So this is a 0.3mm needle. And it's nice, it works, it's a really good go-between, so that way you've got a decent amount when it comes to being able to just get some focus on your model and make sure that you're also getting that detail, but also really good for priming and stuff like that. Like I said, I've been doing some terrain, I'll have some B-roll as well of other things that I've done, like all the base coating on, just so you get an idea of what it looks like. It's smooth, it's nice, it's easy. I do feel it's a bit of a shame though, because the GAD, which is the cheaper one, comes with 2 needles on there, so that way you can swap between those. So that way if you want to do some priming, you can have the larger one, which I think is a 0.5. And then if you want to do some detail work, I think it's a 0.35 on this one as well, so you can swap and change between them. Whereas for the newer one, the Mobius, you have to buy a separate airbrush for it. I assume you could probably get the needle and the nozzle as a separate thing and put it onto that, and that way change between them. But it didn't come with it. And on the other version of this that they do, it has like a little twisty thing, so you can change all the air pressure and stuff like that. It's not the end of the world, but it's a bit of a shame that the cheaper one does come with 2 needles, this one doesn't. So if you are the kind of person who does like to swap, I'm not. Again, amateur airbrush, just use it for all the basic stuff. It's just something to consider. So all in all, would I buy this, the Mobius, versus something like the Gaahleri GAD? And I think it really depends on the time of year you're buying it and what deals are available. The GAD usually retails for between £30 and £40, which is an amazing deal. It's reliable, it lasts. Like I said, this I've had for about 12 to 18 months now. I've been using it for, and I've had no issues with it. So the cheap budget one works, and it does a really good job. Normally, this is, I believe, about £79, so it is a bit more. However, at the moment, it's on a deal, I think it's about £41. So actually, it's not much more than the GAD. So it all comes down to the deals that are available at the time. If it's a toss-up between like £10 or £20 between these, I would say go for the Mobius. It just has a slightly nicer action. It just feels a bit nicer to use, and it's more comfortable as well with that little bit there. Everything else is very similar to it. So if it's versus full price, so £30 or £40 for the GAD versus like the £80 for the Mobius, then I would say you could probably just go with a cheaper version of it. At the end of the day, this does the trick for all those amateurs out there like myself who just want to do some priming and base coating and a couple of effects and stuff like that. It's a really, really nice airbrush there, the Mobius, and if you can get it at the right price, and if it is on one of the deals at the time you're looking for this, then it's certainly worthwhile checking out. So thank you so much to Gaahleri for sending this over. It's been a really nice airbrush to use. It has some nice quality of life improvements over their cheaper one, so it is worthwhile considering all of those long term, how much airbrushing you're going to be doing. And again, there's probably going to be more premium ones out there, and there's most likely people typing away angrily like, yes, but it can't do. Doesn't really matter. Again, if you're in this ballpark for an airbrush that's meant to be budget, then these will do what you need it to, and then save the rest of the money to get yourself a compressor. Like I said, I've got a cheap little compressor. It has lasted for about, I think it's like 3 years now, and it cost me originally about £80. It's done the trick, so can't go wrong with that. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you've got questions, throw them in my comments below, or head over to my Discord channel where we talk all things like painting, 3D printing, and hobby. And in the meantime, stay safe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ra!